All right, Doug, last night was the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Trump, and just wanted to get your thoughts on it. I assume you watched it all last night.
I struggled through it. Yes. And of course, everybody, I guess the whole world was watching the thing last night. And everybody's undoubtedly got an opinion about it. Everybody, every talking head, everybody is talking about the debates, which is, they were really quite shameful uh, in terms of quality. I mean, you got a couple of guys basically ranking each other out like grade school kids. I can easily imagine, because both of them are from the Northeast, I can imagine, especially when they were kids, they were acting like kids. Like Trump might say to Biden, uh, yeah, and your mom is so fat she couldn't even fit in the voting booth. And then Biden would come back and say, oh yeah, up your nose with the rubber hose. And then Trump would come back and say, yeah, well, so's your old man. I mean, that's the level of the debate it was. It was like a couple of grade school kids.
It really was. It really was. I mean, so everyone, like you said, everyone has an opinion on this, and most people's opinion is biased by the fact that they, are predisposed to support one party or the other, one candidate or the other. Just so people understand, in case people aren't that familiar with you, what's your basic bias in all of this? What's skin in the game do you have?
I'm a libertarian. More particularly, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. And of course, people have such nebulous ideas. They're generally such poorly thought out political views that I've often been accused of being a socialist, of all things. I guess that's just a pejorative that a right-wing person will call somebody that they disagree with. So, but that's where I'm coming from. So I don't support either the Democrat Party or the Republican Party, or I should say, either the Demopublican or the Republican wing of the statist party, which both of them belong to. If these two parties used to differ with each other, kind of, where the Republicans were generally pro-capitalism, kind of pro-free market. They looked that way anyway. They really weren't, but they talked the talk. But they were, very pro-warfare. America versus the rest of the world. So let's send some planes over and bomb them. That used to be the Republican point of view. Kind of anti-personal freedom, also. Sexually
Culturally conservative,
oppressed.
they would say,
They would be what?
They would call it culturally conservative.
Yeah, that's right. That used to be the Republicans, and the Democrats used to talk the talk about, freedom, and we backed the First Amendment, and they used to be anti-war. But from an economic point of view, they were very collectivist, and they were sincere about that. So, generally speaking, in the past, the Democrats were more intellectually honest, I'd say, because almost all their ideas were bad economically, but they could defend them and they were sincere about them. The Republicans, when they defended supposed free market ideas, were not sincere. They wanted lots of government intervention, just not as much as the Democrats. But now these parties have both morphed and become, they're both out of control at this point. So I guess the answer to the question is no, I don't support either party. But between Biden and Trump, I've got to say, even though the Donald is, he's an economic ignoramus. I hate to say that. I know it's going to offend a lot of his supporters, but let me explain that a little bit. The reason why between the two of them, I support Donald, is he's a cultural conservative. In other words, he doesn't want to overthrow the way things are currently done in the US, the way AOC and her crowd who are basically the control the zeitgeist to the Democratic Party. He wants to keep things the way they are. He'd like to go back to the days of Ozzie and Harriet and Father Knows Best, where things were calm and under control and kind of mellow, at least on the surface. And the Democrats today really want to overturn what they perceive of as basic American values. They don't like the idea of capitalism. They like almost nothing about this country. And the odd thing is that the Republicans like to talk about the US as being the exceptional country, the indispensable country. And of course, that rubs me the wrong way because it's nationalistic. And I'm rather anti-nationalistic. I'm an individualist as opposed to a nationalist. But still, the fact of the matter is, just a fact, is that the US really was an exceptional, unusual country. It was unique, actually, in that it was the only country in the world's history that was founded on the ideas of the Declaration of Independence, on the idea of equality, free minds, free markets, free speech, this type of thing. It's unique in the world's history. Those are its founding principles. So yes, America was an exceptional country. But unfortunately, America is pretty well dead at this point, and it's been replaced by the United States, which unfortunately is just another of the 200 of nation states that cover the face of the globe like a skin disease at this point. So that's where I come down on this. So I'm an impartial observer, but I'm generally pro-Trump because at least the Republicans talk the talk of being culturally conservative. And basically, I like American culture, or at least what it used to be. It's evolving, all things change.
What do you think? So let's talk about like what you've seen lots of debates in your life. You've participated in lots of debates. I'm just before we really judge who won or who lost. You already covered the fact that you sound like a couple of middle schoolers in an argument. But like, what makes someone successful in a debate?
Calmness, rationality. Those are the two big things. Addressing the questions. I thought that, look, I guess the most famous debates in American history are the debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas before the war between the states. And my understanding of those debates is they were polite, they were rational, they addressed each other's points, they were philosophical in nature, so that by listening to the debate, you could actually expand your mind and learn something and determine whether I believe in this man's view of the world or that man's view of the world, and decide which one you like best and would advance your own thinking. That's a proper debate, okay? But we don't have debates like that anymore.
Yeah, I think that seems true. When was the last time, though, do you remember any presidential debates? Are there any that you can recall that where they had some notion of that still? Because I don't remember any in my lifetime, honestly.
Well, I guess Kennedy and when did the debates actually start? I think, once again, I'm pulling this out of my memory banks, perhaps incorrectly, that Kennedy and Nixon were the first ones that actually had public debates. And I'm sure they did have debates. And I saw them when I was in high school, or saw parts of one of them or two of them on the evening news. And they impressed me as being, rational. But those two guys were really not that far apart in their worldview. I mean, they were both World War II veterans, and they were both well-to-do, and so they weren't antagonistic. They just had, kind of vaguely Republican kind of ideals versus vaguely Democratic Party kind of ideals, but it wasn't antagonistic. The reason why, as I recall, yes, that Nixon lost the debates, at least this is said to be the case, isn't because what either one of them said. it was because Nixon had a really tough beard, and he always looked like he had a 5 o'clock shadow.
Mm.
And he looked kind of pasty white, whereas Kennedy looked, kind of healthy, semi-suntanned, and didn't have a 5 o'clock shadow, which you associated with a gangster.
Mm.
And it is said, now I do recall this, that's why Nixon won. It wasn't because of the verbiage. It was just because of the impression he gave on TV. He always did kind of look shifty. Certainly by comparison with Kennedy, who was a very good-looking guy.
Right. Well, I mean, the truth is that the debates are a big opportunity to persuade voters, or assuming they haven't already made up their mind. Now, if they've already made up their mind, there's no chance of persuading them anyway. But the visual medium, on television, is a huge chance to persuade people, and there's a lot of style over substance that really does make a difference in these. And when I asked you earlier, like what you thought were some of the characteristics of a good debate, some of the things you mentioned are definitely style, like calmness. That's what I thought personally when Trump came out, and he came out really kind of pissed off, like we really wanted to go after him, and I kept thinking, you gotta chill out, because that kind of aggressiveness, that kind of, maybe if it's really targeted, it can work. But for the most part, you just come off as like a bully, which is what most people already think of you. So you're just validating, kind of the worst notions.
Yeah, and both of them, in debate, there are all these logical flaws that were pointed out by the classical Greek and Romans. And this so-called debate was full of what are called ad hominem arguments, where they're not addressing the issue and what was right or wrong or should or shouldn't be done. Ad hominem arguments are attacking the character of the person that's presenting it, which is, well, that's why American elections are really popularity contests. And that's why ad hominem arguments work. And then, of course, they engage in another logical flaw in debating, and that's called the ad populum argument, which is an argument to the crowd, to the masses, where you're trying to hit emotional hot buttons as opposed to dealing with, once again, questions of right or wrong, where you're addressing the way people feel as opposed to the way people think, two very different things. So it was really, really disappointing and embarrassing. And I'm sure any foreigners watching it probably were thinking to themselves, at least in the back of their minds, is this the best that the United States can put up for representatives of the whole country? I mean, these people that basically are screaming at each other and saying nothing that's of substance other than their kind of personal opinions or trying to push each other's hot buttons. I mean, very non-constructive. I mean, the last candidate that I liked, and this was before I was old enough to vote, obviously, just like Kennedy and Nixon, it was before I could vote, was Barry Goldwater. I read his book when I was a senior in high school, Conscience of a Conservative. And I hadn't thought very much at all about political matters. And I read his book, Conscience of a Conservative, and I said, that makes sense. It's logical. It describes the world pretty much the way I saw it. And what happens is instead of going up against Kennedy because of the assassination, and that would have been an interesting contest, and that debate would have been interesting. But he went up against Lyndon Johnson, who was could only be described as a very crude thug. If Johnson had grown up in the Soviet Union, he easily could have stepped into Stalin's shoes, not because he believed in communism or anything like that. He was just a power junkie. He went from being, white trash in Texas to being, him and his family, a multimillionaire, basically all kind of semi-stolen the way cronies do things, so it looks legal. Person totally without ethics, pathological liar, lifelong politician. So he beat Goldwater. And I guess it was at that point that I started to take a pessimistic view towards the direction of America politically and philosophically, because I asked myself, as a sincere kid that was, actually reading philosophy, and that's why I liked Goldwater's book. I thought it was well done philosophically. That I thought, well, if Johnson, this horrible human being, actually could win by a landslide over Goldwater, who was, I think, sincere and decent, this is telling me something about what H.L. Mencken called bubis Americanus and how they're influenced and how they vote. And so I guess I've taken more of a gloomy view of things as time has gone on.
Well, last night would seem to justify that really gloomy view, because it's like it's all devolved to the lowest common denominator. I mean, like you said, the ad hominem attacks. I mean, it's literally the kind of argument that children end up in when they don't agree on something. It just ends up in name calling. From at one point, Biden called Trump a racist, and I don't think it was quite heard. But like, to me, that's even like that still should, I thought, was like the thing you can't call someone in even impolite company. Like, you just don't do that to another person. But he called him a racist directly on stage.
No, and he called him a clown. Now, whether you like Trump or don't like him, I find him very entertaining when I listen to him rap, because he's extemporaneous. He says what he wants as opposed to what some speechwriter gives him to say, usually. But how could Biden call him a clown? I mean, for all of Trump's faults, which are obvious, everybody sees his faults. This guy has started a couple hundred businesses, some of them very big and successful. He's been in the airline business, the casino business. He's made himself, before he got into politics, an internationally known figure. He did, in fact, make $500 million or something like that on his reality television show, another business. He's been in the hotel business. He's been in lots of businesses. And, some have worked, some haven't worked. That's the way it is when you're an entrepreneur. But the fact of the matter is, and a lot of it's been, that's the bright side, okay? He's an active, dynamic guy who's created a lot of wealth. Good news about Trump. Bad news about Trump is it's like when he said in the past, I'm a low interest rate guy. I'm the king of debt. And could Trump have done many of these things if it hadn't been for the Federal Reserve creating tons of money and at artificially low interest rates, making it possible for him to do things by borrowing money? And this was an interesting thing when they were ranking on each other about their economic performance. I'd argue, first of all, the president should have about zero impact on the economy. The purpose of the US government, even in the Constitution, is to defend the country from foreign armed aggressors. That's why they have an army and a navy. Okay. To maintain the domestic order with the police force, although incidentally, that's not something that the national government is supposed to do. That's supposed to devolve to the state governments. It doesn't say you're supposed to have a national police force. And right now we have about 15 of them, national police forces, with the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and others. In other words, agencies that their employees regularly carry guns. And it's supposed to have a court system to three things government's supposed to do. A court system to allow people to adjudicate disputes with each other without resorting to violence. And that's basically what the Constitution is all about. And they're talking about the economy. And today, the economy runs based on Federal Reserve policies. How much money the Fed creates and at what interest rates and who gets that money first. And neither one of them brought it up. Biden didn't bring it up because he and all of the people in back of him basically they absolutely believe in Keynesian monetary theory. And now they're grooving towards modern monetary theory, which is basically just let the government flood the economy with dollars. So he thinks that's fine. And Trump thinks it's fine too. I mean, he's been telling Powell, keep the interest rates low and keep printing money. So they're both economic morons, quite frankly.
Right.
Although at least Trump has business ability, which is different. Just like Warren Buffett, of course, economic idiot, investment genius. They're two different things that are often conflated with each other.
Yeah, people think if you're good at one thing, you're good at all things. For some reason, it's a weird. There's some theory about why that is. That we assume if someone is really good at one thing, they're probably really a genius in lots of things. But that's often not true, and certainly in this case, it's clearly not. But you're right. Them taking credit for the economy as if, I inherited a bad economy from you and I turned it into something great, and and I'm going to do it again. It's just that's sort of like one of Trump's big problems when he's up there is, I think, is when he spends too much time focusing on himself and trying to talk up himself. And I just think to people who aren't on his side already, it always comes off as just, there he goes again. He's totally out of touch. He's actually they draw the conclusion, he's only president to benefit himself, is what the other side really thinks of him. And in that situation, you're certainly not going to win anyone over. But before the debate, you told me you didn't think it would have any impact anyway in persuading people one way or another. And is that the way, after seeing it now, is that the way you feel? No one's persuaded?
Well, assessing that, I would say that it came out to Biden's advantage. That's the way it seems to me, because I thought that Chris Matthews, the moderator, I think he did a competent and tried to do a very workmanlike and pretty honest job. I thought he was quite good. But the fact is that Trump was constantly breaking in on what Biden said, talking over him and arguing with the moderator. And this is just wrong. So, and the fact that Biden didn't fall apart, he didn't make one of his, he's always stumbling verbally, or getting his words confused, acting senile. So he presented himself pretty well last night. He didn't make any serious faux pas. So the fact that he didn't blow himself up alone, since I think everybody had their fingers crossed, I think he won the debate. He was politer. He was more gentlemanly. Neither one of them said anything of consequence, but I'd say that Biden came off. So they ought to quit while they're ahead, and Biden ought to say, "I don't want to do a second one. Quit while you're ahead," because he might blow it the next time.
Yeah, I was really surprised that this debate even happened because of all the information that I've heard about his mental state, that they wouldn't want to put him out there like that. But now that it seems like he had to, probably because there were those doubts that were lingering. But I think without any major mistake, he probably put those doubts to rest. And you're right. What's he got to gain now by doing another debate? I mean, can't imagine anything. Because Trump did not, for better or worse, Trump did not serve himself well by his conduct.
No, he didn't. But Trump is smart enough, and I think he might get himself under control in another outing. And the Democrats are aware of that too. So I think I'd lay odds at this point that there won't be a second debate. We'll see, because Biden can only go downhill, and I suspect Trump could only get better, since he's a skilled performer, basically, anyway.
Yeah. He is, but that's why I was surprised he did so bad yesterday, because he is a skilled performer, if nothing else. And I was thinking about what it is. It was actually very painful to watch. It was just gross. I mean, the whole thing was it seemed like a petty argument that my children might have about something and they just won't stop, And there were moments where they might have transcended it on each part of them a little bit above that kind of basic middle school sort of argument. But for the most part, it stayed there. And I was trying to think of why. And I think that fundamentally, in my opinion, I want to get your feedback on this, was that neither one of them have any real philosophical point of view. So neither one of them could actually paint any, they could only do like tit for tat arguments about, I say I did a good job, and then you say, no, that I did a bad job. And that's what it was. Instead of articulating either a vision for the future or putting their decisions within a philosophical context so that people could kind of understand it. It just didn't exist at all.
You're absolutely right. They pick policy points like from a smorgasbord, things with no relationship to one another. I mean, some of these policy points that they pick, well, let me see. The Pope could pick this one, and Stalin could pick that one, and the Dalai Lama might like this one, but Pol Pot, yeah, that was a good idea on his part, but they're not drawn together by any kind of coherent philosophy for either one of them, actually.
Right.
They just deal in feelings. And of course, I would intuitively trust Biden less than Trump, as much as people hate him. And we should talk about why never Trumpers are so adamant in their views. This might be an appropriate time to do that. Yeah. But Biden is a lifelong government employee. He's never done anything in the real world. He's never created actual value. His whole life has been about passing laws to put people in jail or to give some people economic advantage at the cost of everybody in general, the taxpayers. So he's a totally non-productive, thoughtless individual. At least Trump has done some things. But why do people hate Trump in particular? I mean, why are people so incensed at the idea of Trump? What's going on here?
Well, there's something definitely visceral, and I know this sounds weird, but I asked my 12-year-old daughter about this the other day when we were driving home from school, because my son actually, I encourage free thinking in my family. My son really likes Trump. My daughter literally hates Trump, and I was like, well, what is it you really don't like about him? And she goes, and I was just trying to probe it, not trying to make her feel, bothered by, like I was questioning her, like she was gonna give me the wrong answer or anything. And the answers that she was able to give, I know it's from a 12-year-old girl. I'm not saying that everyone is like that, but it seemed to come from the same place. And there's something, she didn't like the way he looks. She didn't like the way he talks. She doesn't like his hair. She doesn't like, and I'm like, yeah, but you're judging someone just by the way that they look. And she goes, well, and also he says mean things about women. And I said, well, that's obviously, you shouldn't say mean things about women. Okay, I agree with that. But
I can't recall any of them. Was she specific, like when that happened?
She didn't hear anything specific, but she didn't say anything specific, but it's also because she probably wouldn't repeat it to me. I think it's from that Hollywood Insider tape where they talked about grabbing a woman's genitalia. Right. But that's okay. Or Rosie O'Donnell talking bad about her, in the debate in 2016.
Well, it's not because Rosie was a woman. It's because she's just a horrible human being. It seems to me.
Yeah, and his response in that debate that in 2016 was actually amazing. I thought it worked really well. But I think the thing is that there's like a visceral Blink sort of response. I don't know if you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, which is that his basic thesis is that humans sort of subconsciously create an opinion about somebody in the instance, in a blink about them. And then from that, everything that they say is trying to justify it, They're trying to explain away this feeling that they have, positive or negative, about a person. And I just think there's something that viscerally seems like, I think to the elites, a lot of it, that he seems like low class. I think to the establishment, he's just a real threat. I think it just threatens them deeply, and I didn't care about the election at all in 2016. But when I didn't vote, but when I saw in 2016 that literally everybody in power in the world was against Trump, I go, there might be something about this guy that could be good. Just because why could everyone universally be against him? Unless there's something, because they hadn't made a great thing of the world, in my opinion. The people destroyed.
Well, we'll have to talk about the deep state which
Yes.
is an actual thing that exists as far as I'm concerned. And I say that as somebody that lived in Washington, D.C. for probably 30 years of my life. A mistake, but yeah, I did it. And I think it does exist very definitely. But so why do people hate him so much? I think you put your finger on it. I think it's visceral because I've had a lot of horses in my life and a lot of dogs. And one thing I found out about dogs and horses, they're both social animals, is they often take a dislike or like to each other immediately. And there's no intellectual commerce between them, obviously. They can't talk, they don't philosophize, but some of them hate each other automatically and some dislike each other automatically. So I guess it's that way with people. It absolutely is that way with people, actually. Uh, but let me see. Is he a sexist? Well, I guess all men and all women are sexist. We we see things we like about our own sex and dislike, and same with the other sex. So yeah, we sort people out according to their sex. This is normal. It's logical. It's a survival characteristic. But Trump, as far as I can tell, doesn't make a big deal out of it any more than any other normal male would. So no, he's not a sexist, actually. He's just a normal male, quite
Right. He
frankly.
certainly doesn't think that women are incapable, or he wouldn't have consistently elevated his daughter to positions in his own organization, even above his sons.
Yeah, exactly. And he's promoted a lot of women within his organization. So I think like any good businessman, and I think we can credit him with that much, he gets the most capable person for the job, regardless of their sex. And the same would be true of the person's race. You want the most capable person for the job. I don't care. I don't care if it's a Martian who's green. I mean, the guy gets the job done. That's who I want.
Yep.
So I think those are completely baseless allegations that he's a racist. I don't know where they even come up with this stuff. I think it's a lie, and you tell a big enough lie often enough, and enough people repeat it, everybody's afraid to deny it. But how is he a racist? This is totally unclear to me.
Yeah, there's no evidence of it, and it's that is definitely the ad hominem attack of the day, and it definitely, and because Americans, we've grown up with, at least certainly my generation grew up with the idea that there's really nothing worse that you could be than a racist. So it's something that my generation and younger definitely have see it as, if somebody is that's the worst, basically the worst possible thing they could be. So we see it as the biggest evil, because we've been, just like we were trained from little kids not to litter, and so, we don't litter. My generation doesn't litter. And we don't believe that, we believe racism is totally, totally wrong. And I think, and so calling him that ad hominem attack is the ultimate one. It's the attack du jour, everywhere you go today.
Well, we'll have to have a separate conversation on racism itself and try to sort this out. It's not a question of is racism good or bad, or is it a fact or not a fact. There's all kinds of things. I've thought quite a bit about racism, actually.
We definitely should talk about it, try and have a rational conversation about it, because it's all so emotionally charged now. So
Yeah.
I have three things from this conversation that I want to make sure we follow up on in future episodes. One is the deep state. Maybe we can do that one tomorrow. Second one, MMT, because that's something that people not understanding is going to lead to great ruin for everybody, I think. And then, the third rail, the ultimate rail, racism. I think that's something we should definitely talk about as well.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Something
Good.
to look forward to, and I'm sure we'll get some hate mail on at least the last topic.
There's no doubt about it. We'll be getting hate mail on almost every topic. Just we've gotten a little hate mail on every topic so far. So I think if we start to tackle some of the really hard ones, then it's going to come, and we welcome it. And we also welcome positive feedback and questions you guys have. So like in the comments, submit some questions, and I will ask them either during the normal course of these conversations with Doug, or maybe we'll save a bunch of them and do it one day. We'll just go through rapid fire a bunch of questions from viewers. All right. So
Yeah,
we'll
I'm
leave it
sure
at
the
that.
whole world is looking to have the anarcho-capitalist take on what's going on in the world today.
Well, I think so. Okay. I'll wrap up with one thing I think is really important is that I think what a lot of people are looking for today is a way to understand what's happening in the world. And once you have some understanding of what's actually happening in the world, you can sort of form a philosophy of action for yourself about what you might do to positively interact with that. Because whether the economy is going to go into the Greater Depression, or there's a new golden age where money, actually we really can print as much money as we want, whatever happens in that external macro world, you still have to find a way to operate successfully in it. And so my thought with all of these interviews is that you have a really good philosophy for how the world actually works and how one might successfully engage in it. And there's a lot to learn there. And I hope that a lot of people get out of it. And yeah, it does involve some obscure political philosophy. But it shouldn't be so obscure. And the hope of these videos is that it becomes less so.
Yeah, well said. I just like to see everybody think for themselves and take responsibility as an individual, which is why I'm not politically oriented, because politics is all about coercion and mass movements, and that's
Exactly.
not for me.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Doug. We'll chat again tomorrow.